and welcome to the Smackdown Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, to look ahead to tonight's episode of Smackdown on Fox. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review Raw and Smackdown, but also the Wednesday night war between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick to look ahead to tonight's episode of SmackDown. And I suppose, guys, the big news we have to start off with is Roman Reigns is out of WrestleMania. Who do you think is going to replace him in the championship match against Goldberg? Michael Hamflett, your initial reaction to this news?
I was pleased for Roman Reigns to have both the agency and, in this company, the bravery to say, no thanks, I don't want to be near any of this for my own personal well-being. Probably not enough wrestlers have done that in this process, and he knows as well as anybody that this isn't a proper WrestleMania main event, and any prestige that WWE are trying to promote around it is just to try and get this show done rather than anything to do with any of the wrestlers' careers. So I've got a great admiration, more so than I already had, for Roman Reigns over making this decision. In terms of who can slot in his place, there has been a previous success story, a precedent set by beating Goldberg and it working out brilliantly in putting Kevin Nash in that position. So get Scott Hall with a tears down the Performance Center. But realistically, I've seen a lot of fantasy booking that has sort of a tournament setting in which either a Bray Wyatt or someone of that ilk finds their way to Goldberg in night 2. However, I would pitch at this point that WWE will probably go the safest route and maybe have Brock lose on night 1, only to reclaim a title on night 2 in a 3-minute kicker of a rematch from WrestleMania a couple of years ago, just to kind of reset everything while they rethink how they're going to slot Roman back in as and when WWE returns to normal.
Yes, what do you make?
Oh yeah, sorry, it's totally bizarre this, because I feel almost guilty for not morally pandering and worrying about Roman Reigns, because now that he himself has made the decision to just get the hell out of Dodge and not do anything at WrestleMania 36 or whatever bastardization of the show it is, I just feel like, oh yeah, wasn't it completely awful that they were asking him to do it in the first place? I mean, the man is immunocompromised from his struggles with leukemia, and the mere fact that I hadn't recognized this, I feel guilty. So the fact that I feel guilty for not recognizing it, and yet I'm not in charge of his goddamn health whatsoever, paints an absolutely awful picture of WWE, in my opinion. And as Hamflett rightly points out, fair play for the guy. He's probably looking at the circumstances as well and thinking, it's definitely not worth this, much less if they actually had proceeded with Vince McMahon's harebrained idea to go ahead with the show in a stadium. But he's probably thought it's probably been a very tough decision for him, because ultimately he's been snake bit every single year at WrestleMania virtually. It's been a very, very sad time for him on a professional level. Obviously, that's dwarfed by everything else. So yeah, now that it's happened, I just think it's absolutely bizarre that they were going to proceed with it. As for his replacement at this point, it's a very interesting situation for WWE, because ultimately Goldberg, there never seemed to be a chance of him holding that title until after WrestleMania. It was just seemed to be there to do the job transitionally to get Roman maybe a bit more cheered. Whether that was a intelligent long-term plan, absolutely not, but that seemed to be the plan regardless. If we're going to be analytical about this, let's do the process of elimination. I don't think it'll be Daniel Bryan, because rumors persist that he's also more susceptible to what's going on than most other wrestlers. And I think Bree's pregnant as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's off the card altogether, much less not a replacement, even though technically he's probably the next face down on the full-time ladder over on SmackDown. That leaves Braun Strowman.
Yeah, to deal with that a little bit, I read a report somewhere regarding Brie Bella's discussions about Daniel Bryan and with the current state of things at WrestleMania. I think he may well still be on the card. Of course, he could well be in an Intercontinental Championship match if Drew Gulak wins that match tonight, which we'll get onto in due course. But yeah, as a result of his underlying conditions already, and the fact that Brie, of course, is pregnant, I think the plan is that he will wrestle at WrestleMania, as far as I know, but then he will be isolated when he comes back before they can make sure everything is back to normal with him. Braun Strowman, is the name that appears to have been bounced around. The intriguing thing here is we always talk about how WWE kind of pull things out of the bag when they're backed into a corner. The difference here is they pull things out of the bag, for example, when you had, Bray Wyatt was missing, and was it Roman missing?
It's Roman Reigns again.
Roman Reigns missing, and they had all this stuff with Kurt Angle and Finn Balor and AJ Styles and what have you. But that was over the course of a weekend where they had to move some things around. Obviously, the news has only just come out today about Roman Reigns, but the lockdown happened last night for WWE, 11 p.m., if I'm not mistaken. So it's not a case of them going, okay, well, Roman's out. Let's get our heads together and really think about what you can do to make this the best possible storyline going forward, following WrestleMania, et cetera, et cetera. It strikes me that they're probably just going to have said, right, we need to make a decision right now. Who do we drop into this match with Goldberg, and how on earth do we sort of hotshot them into that position on tonight and next week's episode of SmackDown?
It would be very in keeping of Braun's kind of troubled trajectory over the last few years to win the Universal title in these circumstances, wouldn't it? Like the monster among no men. He just sort of wins it, and instead of this being crowning glorious achievement where he should have always been this perfect amalgamation of a guy we like and a guy Vince McMahon likes, he is instead the champion of a company that currently has no reason to exist, waiting for Roman Reigns to return so he can beat him again. It almost feels fitting in that regard for Braun to win it. And as you say, is this not a case of fantasy booking rather than a case of who hasn't yet driven home to the safe surrounds of their own home, rather than ones that were still lingering around at the Performance Center while they were still taping whatever they were doing at WrestleMania?
Indeed.
So, sorry, Wilborn, just to interject before the next question. One of your talking points led me to a segue. You mentioned how WWE tends to deliver when the backs are against the wall. I think historically that's true, but there's an article up now on whatculture.com/WWE entitled "How WWE is About to Expose Its Biggest Myth," where I argue to the contrary to something that I used to believe in. I think this response to the empty arena era has been so bereft of imagination, so devoid of anything beyond. It's just got this horrific air of obligation that now feels, especially in the wake of the Roman Reigns news, is completely irresponsible, much less uncreative. So I would now, at this point, argue to the contrary for that narrative, as much as I might have believed it, like even last year with the Adam Cole victory over Daniel Bryan headlining that excellent episode of SmackDown.
Indeed, well worth a deep dive, I reckon, that going forward. Of course, this news has caused a lot of people to react online and say, well, taking the belt off Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, now seems even more stupid because transitioning onto Roman Reigns isn't even going to happen at WrestleMania. We see the Firefly Funhouse returning tonight. First of all, Michael Hamflett, your reaction to that reaction and how you think they're going to play things out to set up this match with John Cena in a week and a bit's time.
I would say this, I suppose, but I feel like that's more like desperate pandering from the still annoyed Bray Wyatt fan base. None of this WrestleMania, none of this wrestling industry, none of this world looked as it did when Goldberg defeated Bray Wyatt in Saudi Arabia just over a month ago. So I think that was sensible booking based on an objective metric they chose in the numbers that Goldberg drew for ratings that night. And then on the SmackDown that followed those shows, we saw two programs set up that immediately felt more appealing than the planned, or what we thought to be planned, Roman Bray Wyatt match. So that doesn't I don't think that holds any weight personally for those Bray Wyatt fans. In terms of the Firefly Funhouse, I think as long as Bray just doesn't leave it, we can't really complain about it. They've got to be cute about that. He's got to stay in the Firefly Funhouse. That's got to be a little gag that they can make. They've been careful not to reference the outside world and the things that their audience are being asked to do. But Bray can make references about being quarantined or trapped within this funhouse because it all feeds into that pretty excellent promo he cut on John Cena the last time they were together in the empty arena. I didn't expect to like this program as much as I have done, and from effectively two segments, they've done a good job of building towards it. I don't necessarily buy the narrative in real life, but I'll accept it in kayfabe that Bray was never the same after that WrestleMania 30 loss. It doesn't explain his years in the character after the fact and the daft attempts to try and rehabilitate it, but I'll take it for a WrestleMania program. And from the very sort of beginning of us coming to realize what this WrestleMania would look like, this match is the one I've had the most optimism for. Not because I think it'll be any good, But WWE have made a cartoon mess of Bray Wyatt stuff in arenas full of people. So I have absolute faith that they can do the same. You know, mucky fridge at Backlash, maggots on the ring at a WrestleMania. They'll go very daft and very big, and it's going to be John Cena pulling faces to respond to it. I think this is going to be what this show needs, probably more than any other match on the card.
Further to what Hamflet was saying, someone on Twitter has completely ruined this program for me. And despite all of my core being, I was actually quite into that initial confrontation when the Fiend was filmed right behind John Cena, but John Cena didn't realize it was all very hammer horror, but I quite enjoyed it nonetheless. I thought that was an interesting meta element at play with the fact that he buried Bray Wyatt once upon a time. But because Hamflet's got this take that I agree with more and more, that just nothing matters, so that because nothing matters, he can just make something matter in this weird paradox of nothing mattering. Someone pointed out on Twitter to Dave Meltzer, and he quote tweeted it saying true, is that who did Bray Wyatt pin for his first ever WWE championship? I can't believe I forgot this.
John Cena.
So what does any of this storyline mean? Does it mean that, oh, yeah, well, what is the acknowledgement here? Is it, oh, well, it was just a transitional title reign to get the belt around Randy Orton. It didn't mean anything. So, well, what does that say about the championship? What does that say about that road to WrestleMania? What does that then say about WrestleManias going forward if none of this actually matters? So, yeah, it was not nice to be reminded of something that made absolutely no sense, or at least makes no sense now in the context of this ongoing storyline. As for the Firefly Funhouse, this represents a really good opportunity for WWE to actually do something creative. Any reminder that we're not doing shows in an empty gym is absolutely spot on for me. The Firefly Funhouse is one of those things where he's done some reasonably amusing things in those skits subsequent to the Fiend debuting in the ring, but because I know what's coming, like I can't really enjoy any of it because the Fiend character isn't for my personal tastes. And I'm again in agreement with my esteemed Dadley that this match at WrestleMania 36 is going to be absolutely ridiculous. If you think about the various components that make it up, like I can't wait. I might wake up later so I've got the function to skip through the broadcast just so I can watch this match when I first wake up. Think about the components. You have got, it's the fact that it's WWE doing what's essentially a short film. It's WWE Studios, right? Fantastic. Number two, it involves The Fiend. Everything he's been involved with that doesn't involve Daniel Bryan is absolutely rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. And as Tamford points out, I've been long mystified that John Cena has made it to Hollywood because, at least as it pertains to the wrestling ring, the man cannot act. He cannot act. That thing he did to Undertaker, he can't act. Like he's a dreadful, dreadful actor. I think you're going to see the Wrestle Crap Gooker Award sewn up, like absolutely sewn up. You might as well award it in April. That's how bad this is going to be, and I can't wait personally.
Is there a thing with the Firefly Funhouse as well, where, like, not to completely blow kayfabe for anybody that still thinks this, but Husker's the pig and the Vincent McMahon character, all that, they're not real, they're puppets. So in order for those puppets to exist, will they not have to be, like, spaced really far apart because the puppeteers under the table have to be observing social distancing laws? So they can make a little joke about why for this week they're all just separate from each other. And Bray's wondering, why are all my friends deserting me? It's just social distancing, Bray.
I can see them doing something like that, and I'd almost guarantee Rambling Rabbit is going to be wearing a John Cena t-shirt tonight.
Rambling Rabbit can't ramble at the moment, so he's just really stressed.
I wish WWE would socially distance Bray Wyatt from his push.
Let's talk about some matches that we know are taking place on tonight's SmackDown. There are three really good matches on the cards. Drew Gulak versus Shinsuke Nakamura with a shot, as I mentioned, at Sami Zayn's Intercontinental Championship for Daniel Bryan on the line. We've got New Day versus the Usos. But let's start off, Michael Sidgwick, with Alexa Bliss versus Asuka. What do you reckon to this?
Oh, Asuka's like the absolute MVP of this bizarre empty arena. Like, just God damn it, I love her promos so much. I love how unbelievably animated she is at the best of times, as opposed to now we are on the worst of times. At the best of times, I adore her in-ring work. I find it so exciting, like legitimate, dangerous, just everything I gravitate towards in professional wrestling. So I've got reasonable high hopes for this because I don't think Alexa Bliss is going to particularly volunteer to get an absolute pasting like only Asuka can deliver in that women's division nowadays. But I just think her sheer presence and charisma should lend itself to a halfway decent segment here. And I expect that she picks up the win to do the old. No, sorry, I expect that Alexa Bliss picks up the win over Asuka because they just do not know how to book champions. They do not understand the concept of what a champion is, why a champion gets and stays over. That's how they will build towards that match. The finish will piss me off to high heaven, but the mere fact that Asuka's involved in it will make it, in my eyes, fantastic.
Yeah, I don't really want to see Alexa Bliss pin Asuka just to get to that tag team match, because at this point, as much as Alexa Bliss certainly was a star at one point in the division, that star has faded to such a degree that Asuka at the moment feels leagues above her, far beyond the separation that's there inherently because Asuka and Kairi Sane are the tag champions and Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross are not. They just don't feel on each other's level anymore. Asuka has proven herself. She's done that thing in WWE where every now and then a wrestler proves himself a commodity beyond their role. So by providing commentary on an Andrade Rey Mysterio match 2 weeks ago, like that was the moment I think when we all sort of saw that this Asuka character work, it doesn't have to be isolated to her storyline, and so few wrestlers get to do that in WWE. So almost when she's dropped back into the rank and file and the stuff she has to do on a weekly basis, this feels like her doing the admin work of her career compared to the stuff where she's actually allowed to be this massive star. She somehow will be a highlight of WrestleMania because she's just proven herself a highlight, full stop. And this threatens just briefly to normalize it.
No word either on the Smackdown Tag Team Championship match for WrestleMania, but looks like we're heading that way with the New Day versus the Usos tonight. Michael Hamflett, these four men always produce great stuff.
Yeah, I'll be keen to see how this one goes. They don't have bad matches, but obviously this current setup exists to make good matches bad. I'd say my favorite WWE match so far was probably Strong and Riddle from NXT this week. So that's the bar they've got to try and hop over in terms of just using this fantastic chemistry they've got to make something from virtually nothing.
Mine was like Bret Hart versus Steve Austin from WrestleMania 13.
I think they'll do it. I think it'll be all right. But it'll be entirely based on the patter from Big E, I would imagine. Like, I'll be looking for the same sort of stuff we got from Tyler Breeze and Austin Theory on NXT, but just times a million because Big E's got more charisma in his little finger than the pair of them have got combined. So I think this could be all right, actually. But the stakes are pretty meaningless, and The Miz isn't very well. So is that another match that we could potentially see like struck off the WrestleMania card for the benefit of the people involved?
I've just realized as you say that Big E dreamt of a great match with Goldberg, and now his opportunity's right here. Michael Sidgwick, what do you reckon that makes this tag match?
I don't know, because again, everything's permeated by this horrendous atmosphere and the shifting conditions. Because the latest that I've heard is that the Miz was feeling unwell, and it was not determined what he had or what he might not have had or what he was showing symptoms of. And I think in a roundabout way, this led indirectly to Roman's decision to walk away from WWE for the time being, at least as it pertains to the situation and his own health. So does this go ahead? Does this match go ahead? What does it build towards? And then it's a sort of thing that as soon as I become in close proximity to the situation and professional wrestling, it makes me realize that professional wrestling in this situation have got absolutely no like, there's just no point in them being in close proximity to one another. I can't analyze it in good faith or with a sense of anticipation. This is my escapist fun for the weekend, not SmackDown. But you know what I mean? In theory, it would be if it was any good. And I just can't really think of what to say, to be perfectly honest. I mean, what does it matter?
Hey, ho, ho. I swear it's just a cold. Hey, ho, ho. I swear it's just a cold.
The final match we can look forward to on tonight's SmackDown, though, of course, is, as I mentioned, Drew Gulak versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And if Drew Gulak wins, Daniel Bryan gets a shot at Sami Zayn's Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania. Michael Hamflett, Drew Gulak has been a sensation over recent weeks.
Yeah, he's been brilliant because he was always brilliant, and yet he had a company that just wasn't taking care of him. So Daniel Bryan elected to take care of him because Daniel Bryan's a gift to this company. It's been an enjoyable slice of television when there's not been that much to enjoy. I really, really like the chemistry between Bryan and Gulak, and actually had it in my head that Gulak was going to win for Bryan here only to turn on him at WrestleMania, just to give us all something to talk about, to cost him when it counted. Bryan's been so giving in what he said about Drew, as well as obviously the matches themselves. He keeps talking him up as being a guy that's teaching him things. The little Twitter exchange with Chad Gable was all about how, wow, Drew's really teaching me stuff. Maybe you can come on board as well. Like, for Daniel Bryan to do that for somebody is just remarkable. But as Cedric alluded to, the issues that he's potentially suffering, which I believe it was Brie Bella herself on a podcast that either let it slip or dropped it in on purpose to try and force a husband to like not be the person he really wants to be and wrestle in spite of potential health worries, which he's got a slightly weird history with. I could now see this happening as they'd planned it to, but then Bryan perhaps being forced to not wrestle on the night itself, and maybe Drew getting the shot. Maybe they can shoot something where Bryan says, thank you for winning me this opportunity, but as one last gift to you, I want to give you it. And then Drew Gulak somehow finds his way onto this ramshackle makeshift WrestleMania card. If it's for the health of Daniel Bryan, this is completely meaningless. As much as I would love to see Sami Zayn versus Daniel Bryan for the Intercontinental title, I'd rather see my favorite wrestlers stay healthy and a match happen when it's actual wrestling.
Yeah, I have to echo Hamflet's sentiments there. And you know what? Given the character work of Drew Gulak and what Daniel Bryan has accomplished at WrestleMania, there's like potential to fill up the content of these weird WWE shows with some like nice levity and comedy. And by that, I mean, if Daniel Bryan is in fact going to miss WrestleMania 36, and maybe he should, I'm not a doctor, you know, I'm not him. I don't like to police other people's bodies or their health or whatever. But if it was me, I would not want him working there, because you know that he was quite a sickly child growing up. I don't know what his immunity system's like now, but I just suspect it's not on par with your normal athlete. They could have Daniel Bryan do exactly as Hamflet books and says, well, no, you know what? You've won the match. You should get the chance to do it. I've been at WrestleMania before. I've won titles before. I'm going to teach you the way. And then Daniel Bryan can give Drew Gulak via Skype PowerPoint presentations on how to do it. I just think there are like various ways you can get cute with it. And I kind of resent WWE for not getting more cute with it. I mean, over the past, how long has this been going on? Empty Arenas, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Regardless, the two people who popped me the most are Byron Saxton and Asuka. And like Asuka, absolutely, that's fine. She's like one of the best that company has, if not the second best behind Bryan, in my humble opinion. Byron Saxton shouldn't be popping me the most. That's not the way it should go. There should be more creativity placed in the hands of the performers to get us out of the situation. If we must go ahead with it, I don't necessarily think we should. We've got another podcast that goes into detail on this, but just let the guys whose entire life led them to learning how to get themselves over, when WWE in this context absolutely isn't getting itself over, much less anybody else. It's wretched for me, this whole thing.
If only there was a way for Daniel Bryan to tout his responses to Drew Gulak. Gone are the days. Right, let's move on to the final question I want to ask you two. Last week, we saw the debut of Rob Gronkowski on Friday Night Smackdown, whatever the hell that was. What is next for him? Because I heard somewhere that Dennis Rodman has challenged him to a match. And whilst I don't think that that's going to happen at WrestleMania, you sense that with the star the size of Rob Gronkowski, certainly in WWE's eyes, former American football player for the New England Patriots, of course, they aren't just going to have him there as someone to hang around with Mojo Rawley and trip people up.
I hate the Gronk. I hate him. I woke up right on Saturday morning last weekend. Thought, right, okay, what's been popping over on SmackDown? And I look at this goof's entrance and I just think, does he want to shag us? What is he doing dry humping midair? What are his legs doing? Why is he such a hyperactive tit? Why is he so insufferable? Why do I have to deal with him for 2 nights? Who is this man? I hate him. The Dennis Rodman thing's not happening. He's a total space cadet, just to dampen that fuse for your Wilborn right now.
22 years ago that he was working in WCW as well. Like, that'd been all the legend to bring back than Goldberg.
I know. As for the Gronk, I cannot stand the Gronk. I loathe the Gronk. It's not even like, this is completely weird and add to the discourse. I just didn't know what to think. I could barely make of any jokes. It just wasn't any fun to engage with on a perverse or ironic level. Just think he's an insufferable tit who's going to be so overbearing on a 2-night WrestleMania, and they give this guy the hosting gig. It's going to be absolutely unbearable. You know what's going to happen if we must preview the show? I mean, we must. It's the job. It's the name of the podcast. At some point at WrestleMania, he's going to punch Mojo Rawley in the face. But, I mean, Baron Corbin and Mojo Rawley's going to be like, yes, yes, he's going to come off. I'm so excited. He's going to come off. Inside baseball for Michael Hamflet there.
Thank you very much, Cheers.
I hate the Gronk. Come off, man.
I would quite like them to play off to Gronkowski's last WWE appearance. And at WrestleMania itself, he tries to get in the ring to do his bit, and then a security guard tackles into the floor, not realizing that it's an actual planned bit. Just like the last time he tried to run in for Mojo Rawley. Just something that he's going to spear Jinder Mahal, isn't he? Like they're going to play off that. As Sidgwick says, he's going to attack Baron Corbin. I know nothing of Rob Gronkowski because I don't have to. I'm a wrestling fan, not an NFL fan. And I've not been given any reason to like him thus far, unless those qualities are supposed to be likable. Michael Cole, if you watch back Gronkowski's entrance, he looked a bit like when he introduced Grandmaster Sexay onto Raw that time, and he was dancing ironically as if to mock Jerry Lawler through his son. Instead, he was dancing enthusiastically to be like, oh, I'm having a good time. Oh, Mojo, we having a good time? What is this? Like sort of dancing along like this for Gronkowski. I don't even think he could get that over, whatever it was Gronkowski was doing, and think of the things Michael Cole's tasked with getting over almost every week. It's weird.
I like the NFL. I do not like Rob Gronkowski after last week. It was dreadful. It was like he came across, if you were to write like jock bully role, it's exactly what him and Mojo Rawley eventually did to Baron Corbin, and yet they're meant to be the good guys in this scenario. I've no idea.
People you'd want to hang out with, other those two. You'd absolutely keep them separate from yourself because you couldn't bear to be near them together.
He was actually shagging the ring post, shagging it. He was dry humping the ring post. So it's oversexed idiot. He was shagging the ring post. I can't deal with it, man. I can't deal with the Gronk.
But like you say, it is a fascinating insight into what WWE thinks is cool in 2020. Well, let us know your thoughts ahead of SmackDown tonight in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at What Culture WWE. And while you're there, follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflet at
Michael Hamflet.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
And follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at WhatCulture WWE. And make sure you join us tomorrow as a podcast, at the very least, to review tonight's SmackDown. For now, though, this has been the SmackDown preview. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for listening, and we will see you soon.